So we're on part 2 of chapter 25. So now what we're looking at is a map of Europe. As soon as the Iron Curtain descends upon Europe, what you're going to start seeing are these alliances that are going to form. All the countries that are green are going to be countries that are in NATO. And NATO is going to be a democracy-only club. So if you're a democracy, you can join NATO. So you can see all these nice countries join up with the United States because the United States is going to be a member of NATO. Then you're going to have members of this Warsaw Pact. So NATO is created, and then the Soviet Union will create the Warsaw Pact. And what the Warsaw Pact is it's for socialist countries, for communist nations. And so you see these Eastern European or satellite states are all members of the Warsaw Pact. Some of them are going to have some issue with this because what these alliances are is it's a military alliance. An attack on one is an attack on all. So if, like, let's say Czechoslovakia or Hungary, if they were attacked, all these other nations would have to get involved and help them. Now, these other nations, you see they're kind of like beige here. They're non-aligned countries. They are countries that do not align themselves either with NATO or with the Warsaw Pact. And you do have, like, Yugoslavia, which is not going to be aligned with the Soviet Union. And it's not going to be aligned with NATO. But they are a communist nation. It's the same thing with Albania. So the Marshall Plan is going to be another plan that the United States is going to come up with, or it's called the European Recovery Program. The Marshall Plan is an economic aid package to Europe. Europe has been torn up. You saw those battle lines with the war. And so because World War II tears up Europe, we decide that because we know poor countries fall to communism, what we should go ahead and do is give them some money, give them some aid, build up Europe. Also, this is to prevent another Adolf Hitler from coming in. You know, remember, Adolf Hitler comes in because the German economy is so devastated after World War I that we decide the Marshall Plan is what is going to fix Europe this time and prevent another war from occurring, or to prevent another dictator from coming into power in some of these areas. So $13 billion is going to go to war-torn Europe. And countries could apply for this and they could get it. Now, because we're giving aid, Soviet Union's going to look at this and they're going to be very suspicious of the plan. And they're going to say this is just the United States trying to influence with capitalist imperialism. So the United States, in the Soviet Union's opinion, is only doing this because they are trying to influence these countries and make certain that they will always be docile or always submissive to the United States. So that's that imperialism part. And that they are capitalists. What Soviet Union believes is going to go on is that these countries will eventually see this for what it is and they won't continue to go along with it. Most of the Western countries in Europe do accept the Marshall Plan. The European satellite states, the Eastern ones, of course, they're not going to accept it, and the Soviet Union's not going to accept it. So we open it up to everybody, but really it's Western Europe that this goes to. So it goes to democracies. The Soviets are the communist nations will not go for it, and so it'll be the Soviet Union who has to help out Eastern European satellite states. After World War II is over, the Allies have decided that they are going to divide Germany, and so we get divisions. We get these like neutral zones as well. Berlin is supposed to be a neutral zone. Now, in Berlin, what you're supposed to see is all the Allies, France, Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union kind of ruling it nicely. Of course, not everybody plays by the same rule book. So what you're going to start seeing is a lot of tension developing in this area. So Europe is very much divided between this Eastern communists and the Western democracies, so we call it kind of like the communist bloc. George Kennan is going to come out with this term called containment, and he writes about it. And his book on the Cold War is pretty good. If you read it, you'll actually know everything you need to know about the Cold War, and it's not really that long. It's like 200 pages. It's a pretty easy read, too. So when he writes this containment, what he says is you got to stop communism from spreading. And so America is going to take this to heart, and that's probably why we do the Truman Doctrine. It's probably why we do the Marshall Plan. I mean, we do these plans because we're trying to stop communism from spreading, and there'll also be like an Eisenhower doctrine. So we'll have a lot of plans to stop communism from spreading throughout the world. So we want to contain communism to where it is. Don't let it spread its evil red fingers throughout. Or at least that's how Americans view it. So what starts to happen is the Soviet Union is starting to get a little upset. They feel that France, Britain, and the United States are going to consolidate their 3 zones, and it's going to leave the Soviet Union kind of out. And so you got 3 against 1. And so what the Soviet Union decides to do is to go ahead and surround the entire city of Berlin. So you know in Willy Wonka how like the guy says, nobody ever goes in, nobody ever goes out. That's what Berlin's basically going to be. So the Soviet army is going to surround the city. They're not going to allow anyone in. They're not going to allow anyone out. Now, the reason why they do this is because they feel that the Western nations, the democracies, are trying to beat up on them. So this is like a precautionary thing in their opinion. It's not really going to work very well for the Soviets, because what's going to end up happening is America's going to react to this, and our reaction is going to be the Berlin airlift. So in the Berlin airlift, because the Soviet Union has completely surrounded and cut off all transportation into Berlin, they've cut off all the supplies that these people were getting, so medical supplies, food, stuff like that. The Soviet Union is kind of trying to make Berlin love them. So it's kind of an abusive love. Whereas the democracies are going to take a different approach to it. So the United States is going to do the Berlin airlift, which basically means the United States is going to fly in a bunch of planes in the cover of night, and sometimes during the day, and just drop off huge supplies of stuff to the people of Berlin. Now, because we do this, we're going to send in 13,000 tons of supplies into Berlin daily. I mean, this is just every day we're doing this. The Soviet Union fails to make the people love them through force, and so what the Soviet Union will eventually do is they lift the blockade. This is seen as a win for the Western powers, for democracy, because the Soviets lift their blockade. The people of Berlin don't love the Soviet Union. They actually kind of like the American stuff or the Western stuff, and so you can't force people to love you. That's kind of what it teaches the Soviet Union. But it also teaches the Soviet Union that the West has a little bit more power. So the Soviets will lift their blockade in May 1949. Then we're going to see a divided Germany now starting. So West Germany is going to be a democracy, and it's established in September 1949. And then Eastern Germany is going to be a communist nation, and it's established in 1949. So what you kind of see going on is that we're seeing true divisions. You know, this is a democracy, this is a communist nation spreading in Europe. Now, at first, the divided Germany is not a big deal because there's really not that much enforcement of it. But eventually, it's going to be enforced because the people of East Germany, some of them worked here in West Germany, some of the West Germans worked in East Germany. So you could work in the different areas. Eventually, that's going to stop. And it'll stop because a lot of these people in East Germany are going to be fleeing to the West, to the democracy side, because it's not as restrictive. And that means East Germany is losing a lot of workers, and that's not going to sit very well with the Communist Party in East Germany. So the Cold War alliances start. So I just told you about NATO. Here's the countries that are going to be in NATO, and it's going to be a democracy-only kind of club. In the East, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, COMCON, is going to start, and this is really for the Eastern Satellite States. So that's who's going to be involved in this, so Eastern Europe. Now, in response to NATO, the Warsaw Pact is going to be created, and under the Warsaw Pact, you're going to get communist nations joining this. Not all communist nations are going to join it. Some will kind of revolt as time goes on and say we don't want to be in it anymore because at times during this part of the Cold War, it really does look like America and the Soviet Union are going to go to war, and there's a couple close calls. You do have some time when it looks like America and the Soviet Union might fire nuclear weapons at each other. And that's the Cuban Missile Crisis with John F. Kennedy and Khrushchev, Nikita Khrushchev. Now, who started the Cold War? This is a real big, long historical debate. Most historians originally thought it was Stalin because he didn't allow those free elections. And Truman is insistent that free elections be held in these Eastern European states. But if you let people choose, then you're probably going to let them follow democracy. So Stalin doesn't want the people to have free elections because he does fear that those countries will fall to democracy and he's going to lose his buffer zone. Now, as time has gone on, people have kind of looked at it through a different point. You know, originally, the historians who are looking at this, it's still the Cold War time period. So there's still tension between Americans and Soviets. Now, recently, some historians have started to say that maybe Truman is also responsible for the start of the Cold War. I mean, Truman is a hardliner. He believes that the Yalta agreements must be followed, and because the Yalta agreements aren't being followed, he believes in applying pressure to the Soviet Union. If you look at it, you know, both sides have some sort of responsibility for the start of the Cold War. Both of them have different political ideologies on how a country should run. We have different beliefs on political freedoms, freedom of speech. So there's differences between the countries, so both sides are kind of responsible for it. But Stalin and the Soviets are maybe more responsible for the beginning of the Cold War for the simple fact that he refuses to back away from that whole Lenin Marxist worldwide communist revolution. And that really did scare a lot of Americans. But it doesn't just scare America, it scares a lot of the actual other European countries like France, who's still in Indochina and who's going to eventually try and reassert their power there. And that's not going to work out very well because that's going to lead us to the whole Vietnam War stuff. So now we're just going to look at the Cold War in Asia. So the Cold War in Asia is going to be a little slower to develop than it is in Europe. Part of it is because the Soviet Union, remember, under Lenin, he doesn't really believe that Asia, Latin America, and Africa are necessarily at the right moment for a communist revolution. That's why he has that commie turn to go ahead and go out and start spreading communist philosophy throughout. So when he starts to do that, then the Soviet Union's got to start to change. But at Yalta, another important decision that Stalin made was he agreed to go ahead and join the war, World War II, against Japan. And that's nice for us because he's going to be coming down from the northern area. He's going to be pushing south into Japanese territory. And America, we're doing our whole island hopping through General Douglas MacArthur, and we're going all over. And remember, it's not just America. We've got British forces, we've got the Australian forces helping us out in this island hopping strategy. But whatever land the Soviet Army kind of goes into, it's not like they're going to evacuate it as soon as World War II is over. So he agreed to join it, kind of hoping to regain influence in Manchuria. And Manchuria had been lost a long time ago from the Soviet Union to Japanese influence. So he's hoping to regain that. Stalin is going to agree to sign a treaty of alliance with Kershang, who is the leader of the leader of China. So he's the guy who's actually the democratic leader of China. Now, whether it's sincere or not, you know, it's up for grabs. Stalin doesn't really trust Mao Zedong, who is the leader of the Communist Party in China, the People's Liberation Army, the PLA. And Kershang, he's kind of a guy who's got a lot of corruption going on in his government, but he is a democracy. He does have the backing of the United States at the moment because he's trying to fight the Japanese war machine in his country. So Stalin just agrees to be in an alliance with him. And the only reason why Kershang actually signed it is because Stalin's agreeing not to help Mao with his rural revolution. Because remember, Mao's still out in the countryside trying to get the peasants to join the Communist Party so that he can go ahead and overthrow the government and establish China as a communist nation. So I'm going to stop here, and then the next one we're going to go into the actual Chinese Civil War. So we're going to look at what happens to Kershang, and we're going to look at how Mao Zedong is going to take over China.